guys are so great.
Well, thanks. All right. Ready for your options?
Sure.
All right. Fell into it by accident. About the experience. Getting anything and everything. A perfectionist, but a bit scattered. I love time loop. We can just make it normal. I am way too geeky for you. Never discount how normal feels. Or anxious, creative, and nerdy.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I like there's a couple that I liked. I liked I liked that last one, and I liked the one about perfectionist but scattered, and I liked there was another one in there, and kind of in the second half.
We can just make it normal.
I liked that one. Yeah, I liked that one too.
Okay. I liked that one as well because it covered a lot of what we talked about today, but I'm open to any of them.
Yeah, I think I like that one best, but I wanted to process through the other two that I liked before that. But I think I like that one.
Well, let me give you all three and you can pick. So, a perfectionist, but a bit scattered. We can just make it normal. Anxious, creative, and nerdy.
I like the middle one. Yeah. Okay. Let's go with we can just make it normal. Because I think that applies to a lot of things.
It does. It really does. All right. Welcome to season 6, episode 18. We can just make it normal. The Rope Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, S.A. Baz Collins.
Hey.
I'm Vance Bastian, and we're really glad you're here with us. Our guest today is A.M. Leibowitz. Amy is the author of literary and romantic fiction who refuses to color inside the lines. They are a freelance editor and remover of stray commas. Their blog offers commentary on books, writing life, and spirituality. Spouse, parent, queer, feminist, reader, and writer falling somewhere on the geek nerd spectrum. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Right? So, for folks who didn't hear the first episode, can you give us a quick how you became an author, but then let us know what you've been up to?
Okay, so I fell into it by accident. I was just doing National Novel Writing Month for fun. I have family members who do it. It was one of those things I just said, okay, well, someday I'm going to try this. And then I tried it. And I happened to write something that a friend of mine. So I had a friend who was a published author, and I was doing some beta reading for her. And she said, I really think you should submit this to my publisher. I said, you've got to be kidding. I don't even know your publisher. She said, I'll send it. So she sent the manuscript, and kind of the rest is history. I actually do some side work for the publisher. This is for Supposed Crimes. So I do some side work. Occasionally I'll do some proofreading. I do some social media stuff. I do some blogging. So it's kind of just a fun little side gig to
while away the hours.
And help our other authors get some more exposure and
exactly
highlight some good reviews and stuff. So I always find it easier to talk about other people's work than mine.
Well, we're here to talk about yours today. So since the last time you were on, you've got a new novel out.
I do. Yeah. So I don't remember which one I was. I think the last one was part of my Boston series, and I finished that series up. So that one is kind of done. I may have more books in that series just because I like the setting and I like the characters, but I think there's a broader world that may fit in with that. But yes. So my novel that is actually releasing May 1st is called every time we meet. And this was my very first National Novel Writing Month book, which I then just took and tore the whole thing apart and reworked it. And it is about a woman who makes a really unfortunate wish to have her whole day to do over again. And then she is stuck doing her whole day over and over and over in hopes of eventually getting it right.
Now, this book was a kind of foray into some new topics for you. Which one do you want to touch on first?
Well, there's a lot going on here. So I guess the first fun thing about this book for me is that I set it in my very own city. So it is set during the reason that it was released in May, it was supposed to be released last May and then COVID happened. So that just kind of got tabled. And I could have had it released sooner, but I decided to push it back a whole year because I wanted it in May. This is usually the month that our city has our Lilac Festival. So around Mother's Day, we have a park that is just blooming with lilacs everywhere and all kinds of other flowers too. Some of them have already passed peak, like the magnolias, but the lilacs are usually either starting or in full peak right around Mother's Day. So we have a big one of those festivals, like a street festival, except it's in the park with food vendors and people selling all kinds of other things and music. There's free concerts every day, every night. There's kids concerts and main stage concerts, and it's local foods, local businesses that come, and people come from all over the place to sell handmade jewelry and clothing and artwork and all kinds of stuff. So it is really fun. It's the biggest festival in our city. And so I actually set the novel at the Lilac Festival. And so there's a lot of references to very specific places that if somebody in my city were reading it, they would know exactly. They would know where High Falls is, which is on the Genesee River. And they would know where Highland Park, that's the park where the festival is. They would know. I actually make mention of a specific local LGBTQ friendly coffee shop called Equal Grounds. So shout out to Equal Grounds. If anyone is local or if you ever visit us, please go to Equal Grounds because it is a really nice little place in our neighborhood. And it is just the atmosphere there is great. They have a whole big shelf of board games, and it's just a lovely atmosphere. People have talked a lot about, well, you need more queer coffee shops as opposed to queer bars. Well, we have one, so come visit us. Mm-hmm. So
that one is a fantastic setting. I grew up in a town on a river, and every late spring, early summer, we had a Hopa Tree Festival, which sounds very similar. And when you can work that into a story, that's just life. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, was this also your first foray into sapphic fiction?
So it's my first full-length sapphic fiction. Okay. I've written several short stories. I had a collection of short stories that was out over the winter that was just stuff I'd collected from various things I'd submitted for and got my rights back on, or that had been on my blog. So I have written short stories. I had a novella, a young adult novella, two years ago, I think, about a teenager kind of coming to terms with their sexuality and their gender identity, that was semi-autobiographical, I guess, kind of. So I have done it before, but nothing full length. So yes, this is my full length sapphic fiction. And I appreciate you saying sapphic fiction. I won't call it lesfic because neither of my main characters is a lesbian.
Nice. Do you draw a line between women's and sapphic?
Well, yeah, I guess I do. I think women's fiction emphasizes the experience of being a woman. Mm-hmm. In whatever culture a person is part of. So that could include and does include sapphic fiction, but it also includes fiction about women of all kinds. So it includes women who are asexual or women who are heterosexual. Women's fiction is a really broad category, and I'm not entirely sure how much I love the label because I think there's an implication that it means it's only for women.
I hate that implication.
Yeah. When really it's not actually that it is for women, it's that it is about the experience of being a woman. If somebody wrote men's fiction and it was about the experience of what it's like to be a man in one's primary culture, that would be, actually, I think that would be kind of cool. Honestly, I think we tend to assume that general fiction is for everyone. And I don't know that we have a category that specifically speaks to the experience of being a man or being a non-binary person in our primary culture. And I think it would be really neat if we saw more of that. I don't think that means that it's only for men. I just think that would be kind of in a similar vein. So it's why I don't always like the term women's fiction, because I think things get lumped in there that are really not about being a woman. They're just featuring women, and somebody slapped a label on it and went, oh yeah, there's lots of women. Okay, women's fiction. Some romance could probably be classified as women's fiction if it highlights themes of what it is like to be feminine in our culture.
I can see that.
So I think there's a variety of things that we can actually classify that way.
Right. I suspect this is for XYZ comes from our marketers, because they're trying to figure out who to push this toward, which is unfortunate. It's super unfortunate because the genre should always be what it's about, not who it's for.
Right. Exactly. That's how I feel about it too, that anyone can read any fiction. We don't really stop people from reading a book just because it features a particular kind of character. And if we move away from that, I think we'll see, people are craving new and fresh and different and interesting things, but the market kind of dictates where people are driven or urged to go. Right. I get a lot of ads for books on Facebook and other social media. And I've noticed lately that there's much more variety in the ads they're showing me. I guess it's because I tend to click on something if it just plain looks interesting. So now I'm getting anything and everything.
That's awesome.
Thrown at me, which is great because it's like food. I'll try anything once. Right. I'll try any kind of book once. If I didn't like it, okay, I don't have to read that genre again. Or if I didn't like that one, maybe it's not the genre. Maybe it was just a book I didn't like. Mm-hmm. It's mostly how I feel about a lot of things in life.
Nice. So another topic you've woven into this novel is LGBTQ plus parenting.
Yeah. So I don't know how much I did with the idea of parenting. I think I just tried to normalize the idea that when you are a parent, so my main character is a single mother. And when you are a parent and you're bringing someone else into your family, into your relationship with your children, I kind of wanted to normalize the idea that kids are pretty chill about who their parents are bringing home to meet them. So in this particular story, I put a little twist on how each day plays out. Yeah.
I was going to ask if the child's perspective changed from one day to the next.
Yeah.
One repeat to the next, I should say. Right.
And so some things I had them having to adjust to, and some things they just went, oh, okay, this is how it is today. That for Heidi, everything looks different, our main character, but for her children, they're pretty much, well, this is how our life is. And for them, the assumption is this is how it's always been. So only Heidi is noticing that there's anything different each day. So, but I tried to make that just who she's dating. She was married to her children's father at one point. She is proposing to a girlfriend at another point. And the primary love interest, I would say, in this book, although it's not entirely a romance, but there is a person that she is interested in. And although I do use feminine pronouns for her, she is a little bit gender sort of in between. She's not really attached to the concept of gender, which is, I guess I put a lot of myself in what I write. So I have our other character, Angel, is not particularly attached to the idea that gender has to mean anything in particular, or that it has to mean something for her. So I kind of tried to make it's just normal that this mom is dating people that she's interested in dating, not she's locked into, I have to date this kind of person because this is who I've always dated, or because my kids expect it. I just find that kids today don't have those same, right. Have teenagers. They don't have the same expectations that people did when I was their age.
Right. Well, and I like, dialing back just a little bit to the part you said in the middle there. I like the fact that these two characters don't focus on their gender. I mean, when I'm making breakfast, I don't think, how does a man make breakfast? Just make the damn breakfast. There's very little in your day that is actually gender specific. And I would say it is almost entirely tied to who you're going to kiss in 30 seconds from now.
A lot of it is, yeah. And some of it has to do with the dynamics within a relationship. So Heidi's dynamic within her relationships, some of it has to do with the fact that people she dates, she's a perfectionist, but she's also a bit scattered, in part because a lot of us who have dealt with perfectionism, some of us, it just means that we work harder and harder and harder and try harder and harder and harder to get it right. And for some people who are perfectionists, will just give up if we can't get it right the first time. So for the people that Heidi's dating, the dynamic there is a lot of them being frustrated with her perfectionism and her scatteredness, not really anything to do with her gender. But there's also some gendered dynamics when it comes to her relationship with her ex, because he is heterosexual. So there's some differences in the way that heterosexual men tend to interact with the women in their lives. And I have actually noticed that there's a difference between the way that straight guys act with their girlfriends and the way bisexual men act with their girlfriends. It's not entirely the same. There's definitely personality plays into it, but there's a little more flexibility in those interactions and a little bit less, just fewer gendered interactions, I think, at least from what I've observed from the people that I know personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I suspect that's very safe to say, because being bi, you think about it and you think about not forcing it on yourself.
Right.
All right. So can I ask why the Groundhog's Day inspiration?
Yeah, I wanted to know, is it defined? I mean, does the reader find out why this is happening, or?
Okay, so I will just start by saying that time loop, time travel, going to the past and changing the past and affecting the future, that is my favorite. I don't know whether you call it a plot device or a trope. I don't know, it's really a trope. It's more like a plot device of all time. So we're talking, I love Back to the Future. Star Trek 4 is probably my favorite Star Trek movie. There's a whole bunch of movies in that vein. I remember seeing one a few years ago that was a lot like Groundhog Day, but it was a teenager and Christmas time. So, okay. And I love the movie Groundhog Day, but I also don't particularly I think Bill Murray is hilarious, but I don't know that I love his character in that movie.
Right.
So, and I mean, he's a jerk, but he does learn from being a jerk, and he does eventually become less of a jerk. But I think I didn't really want to write a character quite like that. But yeah, it's my favorite plot. I love time loop. I love the idea that we can affect things by doing them over or going into the past or any of those. It's just something I have probably loved since I was a little kid, the idea of time travel.
Well, it's interesting too, because when you take like that Groundhog Day loop, it's almost like, let's play out the definition of what is considered insanity. You keep beating your head against the wall, hoping for a different outcome. And then until you eventually learn, oh, I can affect the change. I can do something different, you know? And so I think it's kind of, and that's why I asked, does the reader ever get clued in on why we're looping? Or is it just something that occurs and it's just the magical realism of it?
I don't think that I ever specified what causes it to actually happen. But a lot of the time I've seen where the person will right away realize that they're doing their day over. And so I actually have her it takes her a while to pick up on the fact that, hey, wait a sec, this isn't just deja vu. I'm actually reliving this all the time. So, but I don't think that I ever specified anything other than it's just the way the world happened to work for her that day. She made a wish on
that day, and then that day again, and then that day again.
Yeah. She, at the end of the first section, she makes a wish on a sprig of lilacs. And that is what sets this pattern in motion. But I never really make it clear whether she is in reality living this over again, or whether it's some kind of a dream, or I chose to leave it sort of ambiguous, and ambiguous whether she's the only person experiencing a time loop. Just because I'm not sure that why it's happening is as important as how she develops as a person over the course of these days that she's reliving.
Yeah, because you have to think about it. If you set it in a festival and it loops like that, then you have to wonder, okay, is everybody in the place having a day over again? You know, I mean, it's just kind of, you think of the ripple effect of where that could go, you know? All these people wandering around, I've done this before.
Right. Yeah. So, I chose not to address that, although I suppose if I ever write another one, maybe I'll address it there.
Yeah.
I do like this sort of magic in the real world kind of
that
thing,
magic realism, mm-hmm.
where something is just unusual that happens to be different that day. So I like that maybe even a little better, although I like almost all kinds of speculative fiction. So I enjoy when somebody is fantastic at world building and they've created a whole space station full of interesting people. Or
it's interesting you say that, because there's a series on right now, Debris, which deals with alien technology that has gone by Earth, and it's actually broken apart, and parts of it have fallen to Earth, and it's causing all kinds. And they're actually in a time loop right now with this boy who had a twin sister, and she ends up disappearing when they do the first loop, and he's trying to get her back, and his ripple is what's causing everybody else's ripple to start happening. And it's really interesting. You say you like the time differential. It's nice when you see it done really well, and you begin to unplug from how is this possible to just going on the ride, you know what I mean? And so, to your book, I think that's what, for a lot of people that love this kind of plot device, it's the wonderment of what else will happen, where it almost becomes a whodunit, what's going to change, what's going to pivot, where is this new influence going to come, and will they recognize it when it does happen? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I kept mine more in the vein of like a Groundhog Day, which is humorous and sort of a light story, but I also like some of the darker ones. The German series, I think it is actually called Dark, is like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
With
does that really well,
weird, the weird time loop kind of stuff going on. So, and I really enjoy that series a lot. So it doesn't necessarily have to be humor for me to like it. It really just can be
as long as it's done well, right? Yeah.
As long as it's done well, yeah.
Very nice.
Excellent.
So another topic you had mentioned to us was the challenge of writing own voices as a non-binary writer.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked a bit about pronouns so far, but I want to know more about this experience specifically.
So it's challenging because I actually find this to be challenging for anyone who falls outside of binary anything. So it applies to gender, it applies to being bisexual, it applies to, well, I think it could probably apply pretty well to people who are binary identified as well in some ways, where you feel like if there isn't a lot of representation of something, you are responsible for the best representation of it. So it makes it difficult to write characters. A lot of people have complained that they don't want more representation of non-binary people as dragons or aliens or what have you. And I'm thinking, yeah, but dragons and aliens and cyborgs and stuff are cool as hell. Like, I'm perfectly happy to read about non-binary demons. It's fun. Mm-hmm. So the question then becomes, well, are you writing good representation? Does it have to be that it's a human person? Well, yeah, of course I want more human representation of non-binary characters. That would be great. But I also love the idea of non-binary fairies and non-binary animal shifters and whatever, all of that is, I almost want to say, well, I know more non-binary people who write non-humans because everyone else seems to struggle with that same thing. Well, non-binary people don't want to be represented by robots anymore. Whereas we're all like, oh no, robots. Yeah, I love robots. I mean, so I think the difference is, are we writing characters that have human emotions and a full range of characterization and a full range of experience? Or are we just writing them flat because it's a robot? And I don't see personally anything wrong with a huge range of representation of different kinds of characters and beings, because within that, we have the opportunity to deal with feelings that we maybe can't express very well using human characters, or similarly, we can just make it normal. It's normal for a cyborg to not have a gender, right? Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to program one in. So for me, I don't see a problem with that as long as, once again, just like the time loop, as long as it's well done and I can connect to the character and feel their feelings and be wrapped up in the story, it doesn't really matter to me a whole lot. As far as if we're talking about contemporary fiction, of course, you're not going to have dragons and aliens and robots and whatever. So there, we really do need more non-binary characters. And then that becomes a question of, I hear a lot of people saying, well, I don't want more talk about them struggling with their gender. Well, some of us have a lifetime of not really knowing where we fit gender-wise, because the world is not built for people who are neither male nor female. Right. So, and there's, I think it's easier for me. I can go to my day job and I don't like the word pass, but that is essentially what it is. I can pass I can pass as a woman and be referred to as such. In a situation where I'm not out. I work with young children, and I work in a job where it would probably be less wise for among my colleagues. I could be out, but I could not with the children that I work with. If they were teenagers, yeah, I think so, but they're not, and there are other challenges that would make it not a good idea. Mm-hmm. So it is what it is.
Do you think that that's part of the struggle, that when you hear that, they don't like to hear about the struggle, but that really kind of is the journey I think of when I hear of non-binary characters, is that they are constantly, almost more than I think even gays and lesbians, they have to come out like literally every minute of their lives because, they still have the binary shoved down on them.
Right.
And in certain situations, it must be very difficult for them to navigate as they truly identify because of societal's, you are either this box or this box. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And in the situation where I'm working, there is definitely still there's still some prejudice just among adults as to what information children are allowed to have access to, which I think is unfortunate because I am positive, just based on statistics, not because of anything I know specifically, but I am positive that I have to be working with LGBTQ students. And these are 8, 9, and 10-year-olds. So some of them may not know that about themselves yet, but some of them surely do, especially the ones who are a little bit older and just on the edge of starting to understand relationships and seeing older siblings with boyfriends or girlfriends and other things. So, but there's definitely some issues with parents not preferring that their children know much about the personal lives of their teachers. Well, that is fine if you're mostly, I don't know that it's fine, but it is what it is when you're talking about who a person is in a relationship with. I don't need to talk about my relationships with students. But when you're talking about gender identity, that's more visible, that's more out there. That also affects how you're addressed at work. It's Mr. or Ms. or Miss or Mrs. There is nothing non-binary that I've never seen a teacher addressed as anything other than those. And so, and it also may affect how you present at work. I mean, I can imagine that for me, if I show up with my head shaved and I'm wearing a pantsuit, nobody's probably going to bat an eye. But if my husband were to show up to work in a dress and a full face of makeup, that could be an issue. He wouldn't for a number of reasons, but that would be one of them. That would be I think about that. My oldest is going into teaching and is gender fluid. And I think about, what happens on a day when gender presentation and what other people perceive don't match. So it really does make a difference. And so it makes a difference to us to see that in a story, but it also makes it all the more important for us to see. I'm an idealist. So when I write, sometimes I just write things because it's the way I wish things were, not because it's the way that something actually is. Right. So I might write about families that fully support their children's polyamorous relationships because that's what I would do. And it's what I wish the whole world would do. So I might write about non-binary people where that's just not an issue. Everyone just uses the right pronouns and the right titles and they dress however they want and they go to work however they want. And the world says, go you, because it's what I wish that we could have. And sometimes I think we need a little break from reality and we need to see that. But we also sometimes need to see what really happens. Sometimes a book is not necessarily for us, but it might be for the edification of someone else reading it who didn't know and wasn't aware that those were challenges.
Right. Now, I want to go back to something that you said, regarding your husband. Here's what I've always perceived. I think that people that are assigned female at birth, but they may be non-binary or they may be gender fluid as they grow older and grow into their identity. I think it's easier in my perception, and this is why I write about perceptions, because they govern everything we do, whether we give them their due or not. But my perception is that it's far easier in many respects, and I don't know if that's because Annie Lennox forged the way and just said, "This is who I am. Deal with me." But I think a lot of those individuals who were assigned female at birth, that it's a society allows them a bit more permission to do that stuff. Whereas if a man like Jonathan Van Ness or Billy Porter step into that realm of embracing their femininity, that softer side, that I think that's a lot of where some of the struggle is. And I wonder if there's a lot of men who are more gender fluid or non-binary, but are totally afraid because of masculine culture and the patriarchy, that they literally live their lives in the closet, even if they express to those few in their private circle who they really are. But I have to think that that's partially why a lot of men may end up, committing suicide or something, because it is a big thing for men in their 40s and 50s. That is an epidemic. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about it a lot, and men aren't given the permission to express themselves that way in American society, primarily. What are your thoughts on that?
So I would agree with you that I think that in terms of physical presentation, it is very definitely easier to be female assigned and be non-binary and actually present in a way that is non-traditionally feminine, as opposed to being non-binary and being male assigned and presenting in ways that are not traditionally masculine. I think that is definitely a difference. But I would say that in many ways, what I think sometimes gets lost is that people just assume non-binary is one identity. So it's almost like people have said, okay, we have three genders, male, female, and neither. And that's not really how non-binary works. There's so many different categories of non-binary. There are people who are agender and people who are bigender, people who are gender fluid, people who are, who just consider themselves like me. I just say non-binary because I don't really have much of a sense of what that means other than not man and not woman. There's a whole range of different experiences, and like sexuality, where a person who's bisexual is not 50-50 in their action. A person who is non-binary is not 50-50 masculine and feminine. So in many ways, it's easiest if you like presenting closest to the gender that you were assigned at birth. That is easiest on either end. If you
Do you think people get confused because there seems to be that intersectionality between what people say is gender fluid and non-binary? Do you think people get those two things kind of confused and that kind of complicates the situation?
I do.
Think that's where some people really have a disconnect, a dissonant moment where they go, but isn't that the same? I mean, and I think that that's part of the perception problem when people say they're non-binary or they're gender fluid, Right,
because non-binary is kind of a huge umbrella term, which is itself within the umbrella of trans. Mm-hmm. So people are very definitely confused because anything that's not this or that tends to confuse people. If you can't put it in a box, it just confuses people. So that's certainly part of it. I think really, realistically, the challenges are different for non-binary people depending on a whole huge number of factors. I think a big thing is that it's just really not easy for anyone who was assigned male to present in any way that is not traditionally masculine. So it doesn't matter whether you're non-binary or not. You could be a binary male-identified, male-assigned person who just happens to like wearing some seriously pretty eyeliner and lipstick. You could love wearing dresses and people will still kind of be like, no. There's definitely some ways in which female assigned people can have our presentation targeted by other people. I've been out with my dog and I don't know that I necessarily look particularly butch, but I've had my hair shorter. And a couple summers ago, I was out walking my dog and a couple of guys drove past me and called me a dyke and threw a slushie at me. So you definitely can be targeted if you're not presenting in a way that people think you should be.
Right.
But what I find most interesting is that for me, a lot of my internal workings, just I don't even sometimes get women, to be honest. And when I'm in a group of women and they're talking about things, the other day, a group of women were talking about how they don't understand science fiction and don't like it. And this was at work. And these are all some fairly traditionally feminine people. And I just kind of sat there going, oh, honey, I am way too geeky for you. And I just felt a little awkward, like they were really emphasizing the fact that it's not a feminine thing to enjoy geeky pursuits. And I'm thinking, you have not watched enough YouTube.
Right.
Gamer girls who are on. I mean, these are definitely some real feminine women.
Some of the gamer girls, some of the cosplay girls.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think there's
Do you
just
think it's a generational thing?
Yeah, I don't know. These are people who are younger than I am, so I'm not sure if it's a generational thing, because these are millennials and I'm a solid Gen Xer, so I don't know. But yeah, so I think people just are very locked into binary thinking. I'm more likely to be attacked for being perceived as a woman than for being perceived as non-binary. So I definitely think that there's a lot of misogyny that goes into how people are targeted and why. So I don't know. I don't know whether I think it's necessarily easier to be one thing or another, but I definitely think it can be safer is maybe a better way.
Right. It's really funny because there's a great series on HBO Max that CNN actually did, oddly enough. They do each of the decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the aughts. And it's really interesting because you watch these things and you kind of go, oh my God, we've not moved the needle much. Because some of the stuff that we're talking about today that we're still fighting, are still the things that were back in the 60s. And you're like, oh my Lord, there was a sense of hopelessness when I was watching. I'm like, oh my God, it's still the same. It's exactly the same with what we're dealing with now with race issues. And it's just, it's frightening how little we think we've moved. We think we've made leaps and bounds. And yeah, in some areas we have. But at the same time, we're still having the same conversations our parents did. Right.
So I grew up on... So back in I want to say it must have been the early 70s, because my siblings, my brother and my sister, remember when the record album was brand new, but there was Free to Be You and Me, which was a lot about gender roles and gender presentation and expectations.
Right.
And I grew up on when they made it into it was like a little short TV special. And I remember. So in the early 80s, we watched this on reel-to-reel projector in the classroom. Wow, I am really dating myself. Not quite as bad as film strip. I remember those two. But yeah, and it was one of those things where in the early 80s, my classmates and I, every time we had the opportunity to watch something as a special treat, that was the one that we asked for most often. And I can see the influence of that in now I've reconnected with many of my high school classmates and have seen that us in particular, we seem to be a group that was much more open-minded than I realized that we were even when I was in high school. So on the one hand, yes, growing up with that kind of stuff did make a difference. We're now raising our children and hopefully raising them better than we were raised. But on the other hand, you're right. I don't know that as a society, I don't know that we've moved too far beyond that. Like I think we're still discussing whether or not boys can have dolls.
Yeah, I know.
Breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Well, and back on I think you'd asked me before about people being confused between gender fluid and non-binary. I actually think that people are confused most between gender presentation and gender identity.
Mm.
So you can be non-binary and present any way you want. There isn't a look. Non-binary doesn't have a look. There are lots of ways.
Although I think Hollywood is trying to force a look.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
With some of the non-binary characters they present, they all tend to look the same.
Yes, they all.
And I think that's part of the story. I mean, I kind of like what Star Trek Discovery is doing with their non-binary characters, because they're not trying to hone that specific, very, very monochrome kind of presentation, which is how I feel like some of the other shows have done. And I'm not saying that that's not how the character might really be in that reality, but it just seems like, I always worry when Hollywood tries to approach something like that. You always have to kind of go, okay, how are you handling this? What are you doing with it?
Right. Yeah. Star Trek The Next Generation. Was it Star Trek The Next Generation that had the episode? I don't even remember what it was called, but the one with all the people who were all the same gender and they all kind of looked the same. Yeah. And they were like monochrome. That's
right. Exactly.
Yeah. Go find the pilot for Next Generation, because in that first episode, even the males in Starfleet were wearing essentially dresses.
Yeah.
Their uniform.
They had the mini skirt.
It was a mini skirt uniform. They tried, and that got beat down real fast.
Yeah. What was the, I was going to say that I think that people assume that non-binary looks like 70s David Bowie or Ruby Rose. That's it. That's the only look you're allowed to have as a non-binary person. And I'm thinking, wait, no, I know non-binary people who are like big beardy people, I know non-binary people who have long flowing hair down to their feet, and curvy figures. I know people who are all kinds of ways.
But that's my fear, that Hollywood, in its effort to try and present some of these characters, unless they have people who are on the staff of writers and
right.
I mean, that's why I think Pose was so important, because it was a story about the queer community from the queer community. Mm-hmm. So you got it authentically. And I think that's why people responded to it as much as they have. But you have another show where they write one in and you're thinking, okay, is this being shoehorned in just so they can appear, they're cool, they have a character, or is there some presence of that in the production staff that will lend that authenticity to the inclusion of this character? Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, which I think makes it all the more important that if I love the fact that many people want to include non-binary representation, want to include characters who are non-binary, want to include using neopronouns or using they, them. I love that people who are not non-binary want to do that. I think that's fantastic. But I think it does emphasize the need for us to write our own stories, because we know what we are like. Mm-hmm. We know what our experiences are and have been, and we know how varied those can be. So I think it's really more about having a variety of things rather than taking anything out of the equation. So again, not taking out the fantasy or the science fiction, leaving that in and including that along with everything else, but also making sure that we are having as many different kinds of stories as we can. We've done, as far as I can tell, I think people have done pretty well with that when it comes to gay and lesbian fiction. And even bisexual fiction is getting there, that there are many more representations of different kinds of bisexual expression. Still haven't seen too much of bisexual characters in relationships with people of different genders than their own. But we're getting there slowly. And I think we are getting there with non-binary characters. I think we have enough people who are own voices, books that are coming out and writers who write those. I think we have some open-minded people who are beginning to include that, even if they themselves are not non-binary. I think it's coming. I feel very hopeful. We may not be there yet, but I feel hopeful.
Right. It's nice that we have an administration that even acknowledges elements of our community that have been downtrodden for so long and smeared for so long. It's nice to see that, to have a president just tell trans people, I have your back. That's huge. Anyways, are you ready for our RFQs this year?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
What habit has mattered to you the most in getting through the last year or two?
Oh, so I think the thing that has really made a difference in the last year is making sure that I'm taking time with my family. Just specifically spending time with each person doing things that we enjoy doing together. So making sure that when my husband is out walking the dog and it's a day that I'm at home, that I'm also going out, and so that we have time together, just taking that walk, or playing a game with one of the kids, or lately, as the weather has turned a little nicer, I've actually gone on some of those hikes with my son.
Nice.
Making sure that I'm getting that time, because we don't have a lot of time with a lot of other people. We're it. But instead of being at each other's throats because we're stuck together all the time, getting that personal time together and getting time together as a family, cooking dinner, playing games that we all like to do, watching a movie. My son and I started watching different TV shows or movies last year together. That was like our big thing that we do together.
Nice.
So yeah, that's really gotten us through a lot of this.
Yeah.
Pandemic stuff.
My husband and I enacted a no devices at the dinner table rule so we could be present for each other during that period.
Yep.
for exactly the same reason. So we'd have that time that we were actually interacting with each other.
Yeah.
So what's one thing you did more of in 2020 that you enjoyed and will continue?
Ooh, so I started doing a lot more learning, just taking classes, taking trainings and doing other things. And now I've done some that are geared toward work, but it really did help to know, where am I going with this? What is it that I want to do next? So yeah, I don't want to stop learning new things.
I agree. So what's one thing you did less of in 2020 that you realized you don't need?
I do not need to be busy 24/7. It was super nice to have so many things canceled. I feel so terrible saying that. No. And I hope that whoever's listening doesn't think that I don't like being with them. But oh my goodness, not having to drive somewhere every single night is the best.
I think we had globally forgotten to take time for ourselves.
Yeah.
And this sort of reminded us that it's okay.
Yeah, I don't miss that at all.
Very nice. Well, what makes you feel motivated, inspired, and excited?
My job. I love my new job.
That's awesome.
I spent almost 7 years trying to figure out what was wrong with me autoimmune health-wise. We figured it out, and I'm on new medication that essentially makes me feel pretty much normal. And so I think people should not ever discount how normal feels and how good it feels to be able to be out of the house doing a job and working with people that I like working with and doing a job that I love. So that motivates me. I feel every day like I get to get up and I get to go there and I get to see people I like and do work that I like. So, and it makes me feel more creative and more inspired and healthier in general.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what 3 words describe you best?
Okay. I gave this one a lot of thought. I would say my 3 big words are anxious, creative, and nerdy.
Nice. Well, what's your proudest accomplishment?
Oh, so I am going to go with my proudest accomplishment being, well, I guess if you'd asked me this question after I passed my exam, that I'm taking an exam to be a teaching assistant next week. So if I pass that exam, maybe that'll be my proudest accomplishment. But since I'm not there yet, I want to say I think my proudest accomplishment thus far is when I earned my master's degree. I earned the first half working for the college and the second half while raising toddlers. And I am actually really proud of myself that I made it through that.
Again, kudos. That's fantastic. All right. Final question. What's the most daring thing you've ever done?
You're asking the wrong person. I am seriously not a very daring person. I guess the most daring thing that I mean, honestly, probably the most daring thing I've ever done is, we went to Cedar Point when my oldest was, I want to say he was 12 when we went there. And the most daring thing that I did was probably trying to ride on just about every roller coaster there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I have a kid who loves roller coasters. And the only one I wouldn't ride, so I guess I'm not very daring after all, the only one I wouldn't ride was the one that is a straight up and straight back down. I was not getting on that thing.
Is that really a roller coaster though?
Nope. Not in my opinion.
No. You made it through the questions.
I did. Maybe that should be my proudest accomplishment.
No, this was easy by comparison.
Kidding.
Compared to a master's degree, this was nothing. All right. So what have you got coming up next? I know your book is releasing as we speak, so you've got that to promote.
Yeah.
Table? Are you doing any events for it? Any online?
No, I don't have anything planned. I do have the book though, so you can see what beautiful cover this is. This is my gorgeous cover. So my daughter helped me design that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, she's quite good with that kind of thing. So coming up, I've got a couple of things. Actually, I have one novel. This one is being released by Supposed Crimes, but I also have a novel that is sitting with Beaten Track. And that one is hopefully to be released later this year or early next year. Not sure. Doesn't really make any difference. There's a lot of people who were ahead of me in the queue. So that was just, I knew that was going to be a while. And that one is a road trip buddy novel.
Fun.
Yeah. And I have another couple of things in the works for, like I mentioned earlier about the Boston series. I think I'm done with that set of characters, but I'm keeping the setting. So I've got another one in the works for that, and another closer to literary fiction that's in the works. And I think that might be it. Most of my primary writing is going to be during the summer now when I have vacation.
So you just dropped 4 works in progress on me. That's a lot.
Well, technically the novel that's with Beaten Track is not a work in progress. It's done. It's just waiting for editing. Understood. And then the other two are just ones that are ongoing projects that I dabble in whenever I have the opportunity to.
Fair enough. So which social media should people follow to get these updates?
Probably the ideal one to follow. I'm not on Twitter very much. So ideally following me on Facebook, but I would actually suggest more to follow Beaten Track or Supposed Crimes, their actual Facebook pages or Twitter accounts, because those get updated more frequently. And I'm actually the one who does the writing for Supposed Crimes. So if you want to read my blog posts, that's where I blog. Perfect.
All right. Any final words of wisdom?
Just happy reading and writing, and go learn something new today.
Nice. All right, folks, this is Written on the Edge. The Wrote Podcast is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to A.M. Leibowitz for being with us today. Ames, thank you so much.
No problem. I enjoyed this a lot.
Me too. Now, by the time this is aired, Every Time We Meet is out. Go pick it up. Prepare yourself for a Groundhog Day repeat of a non-binary character you probably should just go read, because you need to learn. Learning is always ongoing. And for that, we love you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Yes. Well, I mean, my again, with my older kid who does nutty things sometimes. The other day, I brought home weird flavored chips from Aldi, and I said, so we're going to try these. And he said, great, I'm going to film us trying them. And I said, you are? Okay. So I am probably somewhere floating around on Instagram.
Nice.
In a video.
Reaction videos are big.
Yep. Actually, one of my favorite YouTube channels is the Try channel, which is Irish people trying weird things.
Yeah.